So I asked myself, wait, right? Why am I talking? And I really try to make sure that I'm letting other people come up with the ideas and say what needs to be said. And then I just add to it rather than always leading. But that's a very hard thing for me.
Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphna Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact, so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit, and makes a difference. Today, I've got a real treat for you in this conversation with Kerry Siggins. Here we have a powerful, dynamic woman who really knows how to live life to the full. Her story begins with a life of partying hard and working hard, which also involved drug addiction in order to keep her going at the pace that she was used to, until the day that she collapsed and thought this was her last moment. She thought she was going to die. And this was her watershed moment. At this point, Kerry decided to move back to her hometown to recover and rebuild her life. She applied for a job and became CEO of that company within 2 years of starting to work there at the age of 29. Kerry Siggins didn't plan to become the CEO of a major global company, but as we know, life has a way of offering up the challenges and adventures that give us the exact nudges we need. Kerry is a natural leader who really cares about her work and her people. She has a learning mindset and focuses on asking questions, really listening, and coordinating her teams to make her business a success. And this is what makes her a great CEO. In this episode, we talk about employee stock ownership, creating that own it mindset, and how that impacts engagement and company culture, and really about how leadership can be learned as you go along. I love it when she says, if you want people to tell you things, you have to ask the questions and then really listen. This is a strength that many leaders wish they had and actually need to consciously work on. A real leader is a learner. You need to ask questions and really listen to the answers that you're given. This episode is jam-packed with ways you can make this happen in your own company. So listen in, and as always, share your thoughts with me. Head on to my website at daphnahorowitz.com for great leadership resources and information about our events and our programs, and get in touch with me to let me know your thoughts, your questions and suggestions. And head on down to Amazon to buy a copy of my book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders, where you can pick up some useful tips on how you can develop yourself on your leadership journey in business, in your career, and in life. So today we've got a wonderful guest on our show, Kerry Siggins. I'm so excited to have you here. Kerry, I have to say we've had a conversation already and I am completely inspired by everything that you do, the energy that you bring to your work and your life. And I'm just super excited to have you on our show today.
Well, I'm just as excited as you, so thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's start just with a very brief introduction. I don't even feel like I can do you justice, but just to give a few of the highlights of your bio. Kerry is the CEO of Stone Age, which is active throughout the world, 170 dealers in 45 countries. You're also the Vice President of the Waterjet Technology Association. You have been given various awards, Colorado's Top 25 Most Influential Young Professionals, and finalist in Colorado's CEO of the Year in 2017. I know you do voluntary work, you sit on several boards, and you also do yoga and a whole lot of other things. I think you are so busy, but in such a beautifully balanced way. And I do want to mention a couple more things before we dive into your story and what you're busy with. And that is that actually Stone Age was recognized as one of the top 100 companies to work for by Outside Magazine, which is something that's always exciting for me. And the fact that you have a real passion for organizational and leadership development, and you are the CEO of a company that has an employee share ownership program, which I want to hear all about. So I think let's start with a story about how you became CEO at the age of 29, because I think that's also just super inspiring, and I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I wish I could say that it was planned, but it wasn't.
What do you mean by that? Did you have no idea or thoughts in that direction?
So to put it quite bluntly, I was a complete mess when I started working for Stone Age. Stone Age is in a small town in the western slope of Colorado, rural Colorado. It's very near to where I grew up. But prior to that, I was living in Austin, Texas, and I was living a pretty uninspiring life of lots of partying and having a little too much fun.
At what age did you start at Stone Age?
I started at 27.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 27. Okay. So I was 2 years after I had started that I was named CEO.
Wow.
But how I got to Stone Age, how I got back to Durango, is I was in Texas and I almost had a drug overdose. And so I had a pretty severe partying problem. And it all caught up to me. It was catching up to me for quite some time, but it really caught up to me on a weekend here, Labor Day weekend in 2006. And it was really bad. And after 3 days of not being able to go to work, because that was my mantra, party hard and work hard, you never miss work. It does not matter how bad you feel the next day. When I couldn't get to work for 3 days, I decided that was it, that I was going to either...
Did you call in sick? You called in sick?
I did. I called in sick 3 days in a row.
Which was something that you would never do.
Never do. Never. I never, ever, ever do. Like working I love to work. It's part of how I define myself. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Besides almost, I pulled myself through. How
did you pull yourself through it? Maybe just take us into that moment of realization, because you started off by saying, I think you said my life was a mess.
It was.
Almost overdose, at home for 3 days. What was the moment of insight, if you can take us there?
So I actually stood up and that morning that I came home after, 3 days of no sleep, no food, lots of dancing and partying. And I stood up to go to the bathroom. I was going to be ill and I fell to the floor. And when I woke up, I knew that it was really bad. And so I said, I'm not going to die on the floor of this shitty apartment, to put it quite bluntly. And so
You thought you were dying at that moment?
I thought I was dying. Yeah. Yeah. My breathing was slow. I was sick. My heart was racing. It was a very interesting combination. And so I said, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in my bed. And so I pulled myself in.
No, has to be on the bed.
So I pulled myself into bed and I just concentrated on taking one breath at a time, just one breath at a time. And I was in and out of sleep. And after probably about 12 hours, like I knew I was going to be okay, but it took me 3 days to be able to function again. And at that third day, that's when I said, that's it. I called my mom and I said, I have to come home. I'm either going to choose to live or I'm going to choose to die. And I know that I'm capable of so much more. And so she said, come home. And 6 weeks later, I was driving 1,000 miles from Austin, Texas to Durango, Colorado, having no idea what I was going to do when I got here. I was $50,000 in credit card debt. I had no money. I was 27 years old, going back home to live with my mom, which was mortifying to me. And I was going to have to start over.
Take us, we were in the story of how you got to be CEO at 29. So you're 27, moving back with your mom, mortifying as that may be.
It was mortifying, horrible. And so Durango is a small town, ski town, and I didn't even know if I could get a job. So I started looking in newspapers for jobs. And Stone Age was a tiny company then, and they were looking for a general manager. And so I'd been working in manufacturing and operations management. And so I said, well, even if I can't run a company, I've done most of these jobs. If I don't get it, perhaps it's a foot in the door. And through the interview process, the two founders and the management team decided that even though I was relatively inexperienced and they didn't know about my situation then, that they wanted to work for me. And so they hired me and took a big risk, and that's where it all started. Wow. And it saved my life because I could start to attach my intensity and my boundary pushing to figuring out how to be a leader. And it was a perfect way to say, I'm going to reset. Like, I'm not going to be a leader of a company and have this kind of dual life. And so it was exactly what I needed to help me channel that intensity and into something that was more healthy than the behaviors I was choosing prior.
That's amazing. So would you say that you had consciously made the decision to step up into what it means to be a leader as a result of someone or a few people really seeing your potential and believing in you?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right.
That's
and Durango is a small town and you can't hide. So if I was going to be leading one of the most well-respected companies in Durango, I couldn't be out at the bars. And so that was enough to say, and my mom wasn't going to tolerate any of that. And so, I think that combination was enough for me to say, that's it, I'm done. But I had really made the decision before I left Texas. I was done. I was living a new life. I was going to give up everything, even though I didn't have much, to pursue something completely different.
Amazing. It sounds to me like also taking on that level of responsibility really made you take it on, say, well, if I'm going to be a leader, this is what it looks like. So what did it mean to you at that time? You didn't expect it, big surprise, you're now CEO of a business. What did it mean to you to be a leader and just stepping into that space?
I remember one of the founders, John Wogelmont, who's also the chairman of our board, saying, young lady, you have no idea the opportunity that you've been given. And I didn't at all.
Were you shocked?
I was, you know what? Honestly, no. I knew, I could feel it. Like, I knew I was meant to lead that company. And for whatever reason, I'm here in Durango. I followed my heart. I quit my job. I left my friends. I moved home with my mom. I'm supposed to get this position. So I wasn't surprised when I got the call to say that I had been given the job. But and I've always been a leader. I was, captain of my high school softball team. I was captain of my college softball team. I always naturally fell into those leadership positions. So it wasn't hard to want to be a leader. What I found is that I knew nothing. I knew nothing about the industrial cleaning business. I knew nothing about the manufacturing of high pressure water blasting tools. And I knew nothing about running a company. So I took this approach of, I'm going to be very curious and I'm just going to ask questions. And I'm going to just start solving one problem at a time. And so when I said, to this person, what do you think is the biggest issue? Oh, this. And then you would hear it over here. And then I say, okay, we're going to fix that first. And I just spent my first 6 months doing that. And I think that really helped me gel with the team. And instead of being somebody who was just going to come in and change everything, all I did was help them fix the problems that they had been complaining about for years. And so
it sounds like you were asking a lot of questions.
That's what I did. I just asked questions.
You went in wanting to learn about the business, about the company, about the people, and asking the questions and hearing the answers, which is, for me, a key leadership skill, is really listening. How do you listen? Often, CEOs come in and they ask some questions, but they don't really listen because they already have the answers. So That's a key skill, is that whole listening, asking, hearing, integrating the information, helping people come up with their own solutions. Because as you said, you stepped into a business where, it wasn't your area of expertise. So you really were relying on the people in the business to come up with solutions. So it really is about putting it all together in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, my employees say that my superhuman power is to get people to tell me things. And I think that the key is asking questions. And I've never been formally trained on asking questions. I'm just naturally really curious about things. I want to understand how things work. I want to understand how people think and believe, and put all the pieces of the puzzle together. So it really was natural to me. But when I saw how powerful it was and how much the team rallied behind, this young, I was at 28 when I took the job, when I finally got hired, this young 28-year-old who didn't come from the industry. And I was all of a sudden helping them fix things that had been broken for a while. It really, I think, cemented myself as the leader of that company, especially from founders who started the company when I was 1 year old in 1979. Wow. And, they were the company, and all of a sudden here I come in. And so, that transition only happened the way that it did because I believe I asked so many questions and then just gave everybody else credit for being able to, solve what those problems were.
Yeah. And it's not, you're also highlighting actually a really important area here, is that it's not easy to step into the CEO role when it's being handed to you from the founders of the business. That's a really challenging thing. So firstly, kudos to the founders, because it takes time for founders to realize that they need an external CEO. And kudos to you for stepping into that role as your first kind of CEO role, because that is tough. What were some challenges there? I'd love to hear some more.
So I had no idea because I had never done it before, but I have a phenomenal board of directors, and my board over and over and over again say to both me and to the two founders, what you have created is unheard of. It's magical. It doesn't happen. There's always a battle between founders and professional management. Maybe not always, but it certainly is more than normal. Yeah. I think that, I think that it had to be me, and I think that it had to be the two of them. We all we complemented each other so well. But I will tell you that if they weren't ready to say, we've taken this company as far as we can and we're ready for someone else to take it to the next level, it would have never worked, because they let me have a little bit of rope to make decisions, make changes.
That's critical. And many founders take a very long time to get to that point, and it's almost it's never too late, but if it could have been done earlier, it is better. I actually also want to say that I think there's a humility about you, that you didn't come in expecting to, as you say, change things and show them how it's done. The fact that this was your first time and that you weren't an expert in the industry probably allowed the relationships to build in a very healthy way, because you weren't trying to take anybody's status or position. You were really coming in with a learning attitude and approach, which makes all the difference in my
opinion. Absolutely.
A real leader is a learner.
I totally agree with you. And yes, that's what I did. I had so much to learn from the two founders. They're brilliant, generous men. And I wanted to learn as much as I could. And I think that helped, because they both, and especially now that I know them both very well, they are all about their legacy. And so mentoring and developing employees and creating this really great culture is something that they believe so strongly in. And so because I didn't come and try to rip it away, I used them as mentors. The transition really worked quite well, because they got to teach me and they got to be part of it. They didn't feel, like someone was trying to take something or leave them behind. We went through this together every step of the way. And I think that is 100% the way that you have to do it.
Yeah.
But I also didn't know better, right? I was young. I didn't even know better.
Yeah, and I think that that's an advantage. I actually think that that's a huge advantage, because say if you are an expert or you've been a CEO before and you come in and you really want to prove yourself, which is not bad, but it does. You came in, what strikes me is you came in with full authenticity in terms of who you are and what you know, and let me learn and let me use all the resources at my disposal to really learn and grow myself as I step into this leadership position. And there's so much that you mentioned here that's really important, which is also the relationship between you and the founders, the relationship between you and the board, then the building relationships with the people in the business and really growing that. And I think those are key. Those relationships are absolutely key. So talk to us about the culture. Tell me about the culture, because I know also about the employee share ownership program. So I really want to know about that, because that's part of, I think, some of the values of the company as well, which is really important to highlight.
Absolutely. So you're correct. We're an employee-owned culture, and we were an employee-owned when I came in. And it is a
Tell us what this means. Like, just what exactly does it mean? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about what it kind of how the structure works, and then how it affects culture. So employee ownership is actually very small around the world, but especially in the United States. And it really is, there's all different kinds of mechanisms to allow the employees to be able to share in the success of the company. So a very common way to share in the success is like a profit sharing plan. And that's how we started ours out in the early 90s, long before I was working for Stone Age. And then the founders saw that it was so motivating to employees. They decided to say, we're going to allow employees to start investing their own money and buy stock in the company. And that proved to be even more motivating. And the way that we did it was very much as an investment. You invest money in, and we do evaluation every year. The stock price grows. We pay out distributions, and so you get the real-time benefit of the ownership. And it created this whole mentality around feeling and acting like owners. And then in 2014, it became apparent we needed a different structure, because the founders were getting in their late 60s. The employees were investing in the company, but they didn't really want to own it. So we needed to figure out a better mechanism to actually transfer ownership to an entity that can help employee ownership. So we did what's called a formal ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, which is run by the United States Department of Labor, and it is a retirement benefit. So instead of employees putting money into the company and getting stock appreciation and distributions, now they get part of their compensation put into the stock ownership plan. They still get the stock appreciation as the company grows, but they don't get to have access to that money until they retire.
So what is the benefit of doing it that way rather than what you had before, which is the stock ownership?
Yeah, the investment. I call it skin in the game versus entitlement.
Okay.
The entitlement program is run by an ESOP trust. And so that gives the board a mechanism to be able to make decisions to run the company, because that's the question I get from people all the time is, if you're employee owned, how do you get anything done if everybody's voting on everything? Right. And that's not how it works. The employees only get to actually vote on only a few things, like selling the company, for example. But the trust is what actually owns the shares. The employees are participants. So it makes it easier for the board to actually manage the employee ownership rather than individual shareholders. Okay. So there's pros and cons to both. The real time I invest money and I get distributions is very motivating, but it wasn't sustainable for the long term. The ESOP is sustainable, but you don't get that feeling of, you just get an ESOP statement every year rather than...
It's not immediate. So what tips or advice would you give to CEOs who want to create this kind of culture? Where do you start?
The first thing is you have to start talking to your employees. Yeah. People are not going to buy into ownership and the own it mindset if they don't believe that you truly, authentically care about what they think and believe and how they want to make the company better. So I always start with telling people to start there. Think about what you want your culture to be like, and are you prepared to make the changes that come along with creating a culture of engagement and self-leadership. We talk about those things a lot, but you have to really want it, because boy, I will tell you, I've been put in uncomfortable situations and I love it. That's where the growth happens.
Can you share one? Can you give an example? Because I think it's really important. There's something about, I can talk about being open and speaking to people and, having a transparent culture, but there is something that you have to be open to. Challenge and uncomfortable situations. So if you can give us a story or an example, I'd love to hear.
Sure. I have a million of them. But I can give one that's recent. So through COVID, we had to, our sales dropped dramatically for those first few months of the shutdown. And we weren't sure what was going to happen. So I said, I'm going to assume that it's going to be an L-shaped recovery. I'm not going to lull myself into thinking that this is going to be fast and make bad decisions for the company. So we laid off about 5% of our workforce, and we all took pay cuts. I took the most, and it was graduated down so that the people who made less took less of a hit. And so at the end of the year, we had bounced back in the fourth quarter, but we were still down. But the decisions that we made still allowed us to pay profit sharing, and the company is in a really strong spot. So one of my employees in the machine shop came to me and he said, hey, all of the people who've had to be on site for the manufacturing operations, we've had different hardship that we've had to go through. We have to wear masks, and we're segregated, and we are commuting. And boy, it would be really great if you could do something about our pay, because otherwise people are going to say, why am I here doing that? And, when you hear that, it's kind of like, ugh, right? A lot of CEOs would be like, well, you're just lucky to have a job. Not us, not my management team. My management team said, okay, we're going to take a look at this. And then we had to take a look at the entire company. Like, how do we make this fair? And we came up with a brilliant, one of my director of engineering came up with this brilliant plan for this phased approach. And we rolled it out, and the employees are thrilled. But you had somebody come up here and say, if you don't fix this, you're going to have a big problem on your hands. And that is an uncomfortable place to be for him to talk about pay. Right. And for me to feel like I'm put in a position that, are you making a threat? But I didn't take it that way.
And also at a time when 5% of the workforce has been laid off. So you would think, just keep quiet and do your job because you're lucky to have one.
No, that kind of thinking, that kind of action will not get you what you want in the long run.
Really is about listening, listening and seeing what can you do.
Yeah, exactly. So that is just a really recent example. Awesome. And, we honored him. We were like, he came forward, and he's the one who sparked all of this. And so we show that it's safe to talk about pay and to come up with ideas and to even say, this isn't going to work and you're going to have a big problem on your hands. Like, what employees do that? I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great story. Great story. So I think we're coming to the end of our time, and I really would love to leave some time for my favorite question, which is around leadership habits, because I really do believe that when you can distill leadership skills into habits, you really need to look deeply inside yourself to discover what those habits are, and then you can make them practical and really work with them to enhance and improve your leadership. So I'm going to ask you, what is one of your worst leadership habits and one of your best leadership habits?
All right, so we'll start with the worst. I talk too much. and so that is one of the things that I really try to work on is people will always defer to me if I'm always the first one to say something. And so it's really balancing when I need to say and when I need to say something and when I should just stop. So I ask myself, wait, right? Why am I talking? And I really try to make sure that I'm letting other people come up with the ideas and say what needs to be said. And then I just add to it rather than always leading. Yeah. But that's a very hard thing for me.
Actually, it's about stepping back and not being the first to say. You might have things to say that are really important and people do need to hear, but don't be the first to say, because then it does shut down people who are maybe less confident or young or more junior.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's my worst one, and something I work on all the time, and still fail at a lot, but I'm getting better. And then my best leadership trait is, well, I think I have two. One, I love ideas. And when I give myself time to think, I am able to see like how seemingly very different ideas come together and all of a sudden come up with a new disruptive idea. Our company is very different than it was 14 years ago when I started. And so, to be able to come up with ideas, you have to give yourself time to think and not fill up your day with meetings and doing. And so ideation is one, and then discipline is the other. I am very disciplined in my life, and it's what allows me to do so many different things. And so, I think those two things together is come up with the idea, but be disciplined enough to execute, be disciplined enough to take care of yourself, to not burn yourself out, to burn your employees out. That's really important, because otherwise we could just be running off the cliff with all these ideas, but not have the discipline to hold that back and make the decisions.
And certainly from what I've seen from you, you're able to really do that. You know when you need to look after yourself and you do the replenishing things for your own energy. I know you're also a mom, which we didn't mention, and that's another, big part of your life. And managing and balancing all of that can be challenging. So it is about actually really being able to be disciplined about how you spend your time. And I love your ideation habit, because I often talk about making sure that you have time scheduled in the diary to sit at your office, not check emails, not be on your phone, not be in meetings, just sit in your office, take out a piece of paper and a pen and plan your week, write down your ideas, just think, just do some free thinking, because that's where the great ideas come from. So awesome. Love that.
Absolutely.
Love that. Well, what are your final last words for our listeners? And I know we will put in the show notes, you're also a podcast host. I don't think I mentioned that, but we'll put all the details in the show notes. But what would you like to leave our listeners with?
So I'm embarking on this be as helpful as possible initiative in 2021. And it's not to just add things to my plate. I'm not trying to take on more. I'm just trying to be helpful. So whether somebody calls for advice, or I can make an introduction, or I can take something off of somebody's plate easily, if I can just be a listening ear, I'm trying to just be as helpful as possible. And it has made my life so much more enriched. I've always been a helper, but I've never spent this much time being intentional about it. And so if I could leave people with just help a little bit more than you were helping before, it really will improve not only the lives of the people who you're helping, but your own life too. And I just think the world needs more people helping each other. And so that's just one of the things. If I could leave everybody I talk to, if I can leave with just be a little bit more helpful, the world will be a better place.
That's a beautiful message, and thank you for leaving us with that message, because I think it doesn't have to be a major helpful thing, but it can even be, I'm just thinking, on the road, people get angry and someone's pushed in front of you, be more helpful and actually stop and let them in. That's being more helpful,
Absolutely.
So that just as a mindset is an awesome mindset to take on.
You feel so much better than getting angry about it. Like doors open, letting traffic in, smiling at somebody who looks, the homeless person on the street, just smile. Do you know how helpful that is to people who are never seen? There's just so many little things that you can do, and you will feel so much better about yourself when you do it.
Oh. Kerry, I have loved our conversation. It's been absolutely inspiring. There's so much to learn from you, and we've covered so many tips as well. And I think also for anybody who wants to include share ownership in their business and really create the kind of culture where, the own it mindset, I think there's a lot of great information and value in this conversation. So thank you. Just really excited to know you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And if anybody has any questions, they can find me on LinkedIn. I've got my podcast, Reflect Forward. And you can email me at kerrysiggins.com. I'm always happy to answer questions or to help give advice or just bounce an idea off. So feel free to reach out.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Kerry.
All right. Thanks, Daphne.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.